Hey guys, Jen from Ezekiel Effect Ministries. I am coming back to you on Monday to read to you a little bit from Hebrews 11, starting in verse 17. And the Lord put it on my heart today to talk about faith and just read from this passage in Hebrews 11 because it's really inspirational in terms of dealing with things in our life that really we don't see in the natural, but the Lord is maybe speaking to us in the supernatural, and why it's important to have faith, because that's how it all comes together, by having faith. And so these people in the Old Testament, they are illustrating to us here in the present tense that we can have faith in all circumstances. So I just invite you to join in, and I hope you're blessed. So verse 17, it says, actually, I'm going to start in verse 1, because there's a little bit longer of a passage that I want to read here. So it says, by faith we understand. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. Faith at the dawn of history. By faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he, being dead, still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that it pleased God. So here's another example. The second time they've said that his testimony was good, and this one actually says it pleased God. So our testimony always points back to the Lord and his goodness. It's not about us or what we've done, but our righteousness because of Jesus and his blood is what pleases the Lord and gives glory in our testimony. And in verse 6, it says, but without faith, it's impossible to please him, meaning the Lord. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So talking about God and how we just are having faith in believing, and the Lord will reward us. Verse 7, by faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear. So can you imagine if you were Noah and the Lord asked you to build an ark, and you were like, and he was basically telling you, I'm going to wipe out the earth. And he's like, wait, what? What are you talking about? It says, he prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world. And he became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. So the Lord gave Noah righteousness. This was before Jesus, obviously. It wasn't because of the blood, but the Lord gave Noah the righteousness of God because he saw his heart. The Lord sees the heart. And he saw that Noah was the only one who was righteous, him and his family. So he was going to spare their lives, and he was going to condemn the rest of the world. It says, verse 8, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. How many times has the Lord asked us to step out in faith and we have no idea? We don't have Siri. We don't have any kind of a map whatsoever. He just says, go by faith. Take one step at a time. Follow me. Stay close to me. Listen to the next direction. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. So it's almost like, he became a nomad. It was like he was going to go around to different places, and he didn't really have necessarily like a home base just at that time. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive a seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now, you know the story of Sarah and Abraham, how they wanted to have a child, and they're literally in their 80s or 90s. She's well past childbearing age, and they were pleading with the Lord for a child, and eventually, long story short, the Lord gives them a child. I mean, that says it all right there. In verse 12, therefore from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand in which is by the seashore. So the Lord had showed Abraham all the stars in the sky. These are going to be your descendants. That's what this verse is talking about. And here they are just waiting patiently. You know, they had no idea when this was going to come to pass. I mean, they're getting to be elderly. But in Old Testament times, you know, people lived longer than they did now, of course. But still, 80 or 90 is still way too old to have a child. We know that. But by God's standard, it was easy as the snap of a finger, I'm sure. The heavenly hope, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them from afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had an opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So he's talking about the future. He's talking about a heavenly home. So all the work that's being done on earth is to prepare a place for us in eternity. So our faith now, the seeds that we're planting, that the Lord is planting in us, in through us, and what we're doing is preparing a place for not only us, but for our ancestors, for our kids, our grandkids, our lineage in eternity. Verse 17, it says, the faith of the patriarchs. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, which he also received him in a figurative sense. Now you remember this story probably too, where Abraham was called to sacrifice his son Isaac. Now his son was a teenager. He was probably like 16. So, I mean, he could have arm wrestled his dad and gotten away. You know, he didn't have to say yes, but he willingly went up this mountain. They carried wood. They carried everything that was necessary to build this fire. They built the altar where he was going to sacrifice his son. They built it together. And this boy willingly obeyed what the Lord had told his dad. And he got up on the altar willingly. And just as Abraham was about to light the match, basically then the Lord said, look in the brush, and there was a lamb. And instead he sacrificed the lamb. So that's the story of the faith that these people had. Verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. Verse 23, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. Now, you know the story of Moses. They hid him in a basket and they put him on the Nile River and they sent him off because Pharaoh was going to kill all the boy babies. And so his mom wanted to protect him. And he ended up growing up and being adopted by Pharaoh and Pharaoh's wife. And he became this amazing man of God. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Verse 27, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured to seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. So Moses was not afraid of leaving Egypt. He was not afraid of renouncing basically his relationship with being a king and being in this idolatry-driven culture of Egypt under Pharaoh. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea by dry land, whereas the Egyptians attempting to do so were drowned. that story of once they finally got to the promised land after Moses led them out is just supernatural. I mean, who parts the Red Sea? That only the Lord. And by faith, they decided to go under there after they saw the waters of the sea, this great sea, being pushed to the side. They walked on dry land all the way through. And the Lord waited until they got there. And when the Egyptian soldiers started to come toward them to attack them, he released the waters of the Red Sea, and they were swamped. They were drowned. I mean, that's just an incredible story. Verse 30, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. That's the story of how, oh my gosh, I'm having a brain freeze. I'll come back to the names, but having a brain freeze. Anyway, they circled around the walls and they blew the shofar, and the Lord told them to do it 7 times. And that's when the walls of Jericho, after the battle, finally fell down. But they had to do it specifically the way the Lord told them to do it, and it was by faith. Those names are going to come to me. Just wait. By faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. She's the one that hid the spies in her house. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. I mean, just the story of David alone, how he went into the lion's den and he was not eaten alive. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were put in the furnace to be basically fried and burned to death. And there was a fourth man in the fire. It was God, and he protected them, and they came out unscathed. I mean, these stories, you can't make this stuff up. This is the faith that these people had, that their mighty God was going to be with them and protect them. Can you imagine? I mean, it only takes the faith of a mustard seed. Verse 34, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. They became valiant in battle. They turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. So Lazarus, Jesus raised Lazarus to life, right? He was dead. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trials of mocking and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sown in two, they were tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And all of these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. God, having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. So basically, all these stories that they're talking about here in Hebrews are of people who had maybe small amounts of faith, maybe they had greater amounts of faith, maybe they walked in immense fear, but the faith is the driving force. So we need to have faith. And sometimes it's difficult when we can't see things in the natural. The Lord asks us to take steps. He just asks us to be obedient. He doesn't want us to be perfect. He just wants us to be available. Over the weekend, when I was at the Power and Love conference, we went out on a number of occasions, and we just were going to pray for people. We were going to meet people where they were. We were going to evangelize, speak about the gospel. Whatever we encountered, whoever we encountered, the Lord just wanted us to be available for how he wanted to move and how he wanted to work. And we had unique situations, and we have some cool testimonies to share. I'll share one really quick before I wind up here. We were over by a hotel, and we were talking to these two gentlemen who were outside. One of them was a guest at the hotel. Another was a maintenance guy. And the maintenance guy, I could tell he was a man of God, and he was basically talking to the other guy, and he was kind of ministering to him indirectly. And the Lord was speaking to me, and I said to the man, I said, "Are you a man of God?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I can tell." I could just tell he was speaking using scripture. I could just tell by how he was speaking. And he said, yeah. And so I basically said, the Lord wants you to know that you have a servant's heart. He sees your servant's heart. He sees you and the things that you're doing, even though he was complaining about how he had to pick up the bird poop and it was just constant, which I can understand must be a pain when you're working in that environment and you have to keep the sidewalks clean and the birds are all over the place. But it was comical, but I could see where he would be frustrated. And I said, the Lord sees you and how diligent you're working. And he had talked about how he was retired and he didn't have to work, but he wanted something to keep him busy. And I said, the Lord has you here on a stealth assignment. And he said, yeah, that's absolutely confirmation. And I said, the Lord just wants you to keep doing what you're doing. And you're doing a wonderful job and the Lord sees you. And basically the guy was like, yeah, that was confirmation. And interestingly enough, he got called away by management to do something else right at that moment. And we wanted to keep talking. He's like, I want to come back and talk. I don't know if you're going to be here. And I'm like, oh, sorry, we're not. But, I may stop by the hotel some other time just to try to catch up with them and just, share testimonies, because he was an amazing man of God, and just those kinds of acts of faith, go where the Lord tells us to go, do what the Lord tells us to do in spite of opposition, in spite of how crazy it sounds, in spite of how boring or mundane it might seem. The Lord always has a purpose, but he just wants us to be available, and we don't have to be perfect. We can mess things up in our own eyes, but in God's eyes, he's the one who's doing the perfecting. And his plans and purposes will always prevail, no matter how much we might think we're messing up in our humanness or in our flesh. So I just want to encourage you with that just if you make yourself available and you say, Lord, I say yes, make me a vessel. I am available to you to do whatever you want me to do. Work through me today. The Lord will do it. Just keep your eyes open. I saw, last thing, I saw 4 dragonflies today on my walk. And dragonflies basically mean hope and change and transformation, and basically like confirmation, that I was walking into my purpose, into the next level, the next assignment that the Lord has for me. And so I think that, we can all say that if we're walking closely with the Lord, he has great plans for us. And so I just want to encourage you with that the Lord does see you, and he does even use things in nature to encourage us. And I just want to invite you, if you like this material I'm sharing, hit the like button, subscribe, share it with friends and family. Let's get this algorithm out to the kingdom, and let's just live by faith. And let's not live by our own fleshly desires, but let's just walk with the Lord and live in faith. And let's just shout our praises to the Lord and share the testimonies. So if you have any testimonies, you want to share them in the comments, I would love, 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 love to hear from you. So until next time, shalom, shalom.